Okay. Of course, when you are on the burner mode, the automatic operation of the oil-fired furnace, that will adjust the steam pressure. So either by cutting and cutting off, or by reducing or increasing the amount of fuel that is being burnt. And as we talked about earlier, the exhaust gas from the main engine has got a bypass flap. As per the requirement of the steam, you will require to increase or decrease the flow of the flue gas through the boiler. Next, we come to the smoke tube boiler. Now, in a smoke tube boiler, basically, the smoke tube boiler is like a drum. The entire drum is filled up with water, and the drum is pierced with these tubes through which the flue gas from the smoke, either from the burner at the furnace, or the exhaust gas from the main engine, the flue gas from the main engine exhaust passes through those smoke tubes. Now here again, if you can see this diagram, here you have a burner which is burning at maybe the flue gas is at 1000 degrees centigrade. They pass through a limited number of smoke tubes because the temperature of the flue gas is quite high, and then it goes to the furnace uptake and is led up to the funnel of the vessel. And on the side, you have the main engine exhaust, again, which has got a flap control. Depending on the amount of steam requirement, which is required when the vessel is out at sea, that amount of main engine exhaust is sent into the main engine exhaust is sent into the smoke tube, and then it passes through a greater number of smoke tubes because the temperature of the main engine exhaust is not as much as the temperature of the flue gas in the furnace, and then it goes up to the exhaust uptake and then goes to the funnel. A smoke tube boiler is also sometimes referred to as a tank boiler. The heated gases, they basically pass through tubes which are immersed in a tank of water. As we said earlier, a smoke tube boiler is basically just like a water drum, a big tank. Again, we are talking about a composite boiler. A composite boiler will be used in place where the steam requirement is not very high. So it operates at a normal working pressure of 7 bar, and the smaller set of tubes are supplied by the oil-fired furnace gases. The burner is burning the the fuel oil in the furnace, while the larger set is supplied from the main engine exhaust gases, which are controlled by an adjustable flap to limit the steam pressure during ship's passage. So as per the requirement of the steam, the flap controls the amount of main engine exhaust flue gas which will pass through the larger number of smoke tubes as compared to the number of smoke tubes in the furnace. And then the steam which is generated, that goes into the steam space, and then it is let off through the main steam stop valve to various services. A smoke tube boiler, it will be constructed from mild, low carbon mild steel, and the seamless furnace is pressed from a single plate, and this plate has got something which is called an OG ring. You can see that OG ring over here. Now the OG ring has got a special significance in a smoke tube boiler, in the sense that at this location around the furnace, the amount of circulation of the water is very, very limited. So you need to have something which is quite thick. Now the furnace plating, as we said earlier, the furnace plating is made of a single seamless plate, and then it is connected to this OG ring. OG ring has got greater thickness than the furnace plating, and then the OG ring connects to the side shell of the boiler. So basically, the OG ring is taking the weight of the water which is above the furnace, and also the OG ring is made thicker because the circulation in way of the OG ring is not very good. So if the circulation is not very good, there is a chance of the plate overheating, of the location overheating and getting deformed. We will come to the construction of the OG ring later, and also regarding this the domed furnace. Why is it made of a single seamless plate? We will come to that. Sometimes you can also have a 3-pass smoke tube boilers. The 3-pass smoke tube boilers basically tries to make maximum use of the heat which is there in the flue gas from the burning of fuel oil by the burner. So in your first pass, the temperature, there is a certain amount of temperature drop. In the second pass, again, amount of temperature drop. Basically, it is just like the main engine exhaust. The exhaust from the main engine is first used to power the turbocharger. There is an enthalpy drop in the turbocharger. Then the exhaust gas after the turbocharger is led to the exhaust boiler, and the exhaust boiler, it further gives up its heat and produces steam. This is something like that. In the first pass, it will give up some of its heat. The second pass, again, some more heat, and then the third pass, it will whatever remaining heat is there, it will give up that, and then it will go off to the uptake in the vessel's funnel. And here you have basically a steam stop valve, and from the steam stop valve, the steam is let out to the basically services. Now, what are the differences between a smoke tube and a water tube boiler? Nowadays, on board the ship, you may not find that many smoke tube boilers as water tube boilers, and the reasons we will come to now. Smoke tube boilers are basically heavier in comparison to water tube boilers. Since a smoke tube boiler contains a larger amount of water, and also hence it has to be made of thicker material. Basically, it's like a drum. So since it is made like a drum, the flat surface area is quite a bit. So for it to be able to take pressures, the thickness of the material which is used in a smoke tube boiler is also higher. As a result, it is made more heavy as compared to a water tube boiler. Again, because they are very heavy, and basically the smoke is being led through tubes which is there in the drum of the smoke tube boiler, which is like a drum. Got the smoke tubes. The efficiency is quite low. So basically, it can only generate low or medium pressure steam. Smoke tube boilers are not normally used for high pressure steam. For smoke tube boilers to generate high pressure steam, the boiler has to be made much thicker and much heavier. And again, point number 3, because of the way in which the smoke tube boiler, they heat up the water, the efficiency is much less. So basically, for the amount of fuel which you are burning in a smoke tube boiler, the steam output is much less as compared to a water tube boiler. In a smoke tube boiler, point number 4, in a smoke tube boiler, you have less circulation. The water circulation is quite poor. We talked about that OG ring earlier, which is the OG ring which is around the furnace. So because of the poor water circulation, the threat of thermal stresses in a smoke tube boiler is higher. And thermal stresses can lead to deformation of the plating, which can again lead to accidents, and obviously it's quite dangerous. A smoke tube boiler, because it is bigger, it consumes more space, and the generation of steam takes a much longer time. A smoke tube boiler, to warm it up from absolute cold, will take maybe anywhere between 8 to 12 hours, depending on the size of the boiler. And it consumes more space. So that means if you had only a smoke tube boiler in your, if we didn't have water tube boilers, we only had smoke tube boilers, the smoke. Smoke tube boilers are heavier, and they also consume more space. So that means if we only had smoke tube boilers on board ships, your engine rooms would require to be much bigger, which again is not advisable, because the idea is to keep the engine rooms as small as possible and the cargo space as large as possible. So if you want to have a very heavy equipment in the engine room, that is not a very ideal condition. And as we talked about earlier, due to the poor circulation. Yes. Yes, Abraham.
Yes.
Go ahead, Abraham. You're coming.
What do you mean by low efficiency combustion?
Low efficiency combustion.
Yes.
Okay. Let me go back. Because of the design of a smoke tube boiler, the amount of steam which you get for say, if you're burning 1 kg of fuel, the amount of steam which you get will be much less than that of a water tube boiler. Basically, the heat transfer between the flue gas from burning 1 kg of heavy fuel oil is much less. I mean, the heat transfer will be much less as compared to a water tube boiler. The efficiency of a smoke tube boiler is around maybe 80 to 85%, whereas for a water tube boiler, it is higher. So for a fixed amount of fuel which you are burning, the amount of steam which you get will be less. Does that clear your doubt?
Yeah, so actually it will be similar. Item number 2 and item number 3 will be similar. It's not the combustion. Combustion will be same, but the heat transfer is different.
The heat transfer is poorer. The heat transfer in a smoke tube boiler is poorer as compared to a water tube boiler. So basically, the thermal efficiency is lower.
Yes.
Of a smoke tube boiler.
So can we say less efficient combustion?
Abraham, you're coming broken. Could you repeat that again, please?
So can we say it's less efficient combustion?
Basically, the efficiency of the combustion will be this more or less the same. Basically, it's the entire efficiency of the boiler which we are talking about.
Yes, yes, okay, okay. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, you're probably right. Maybe we'll have to reword this over here.
Okay, okay, it's clear, Chair.
Thanks, Abraham. Okay, coming back to this, the furnace and shell of a smoke tube boiler is sometimes subject to deformations because the water circulation in these kind of boilers is quite poor, especially in way of the OG ring. And if due to thermal stresses, the furnace and the shell of the boiler starts deforming, that means basically the plating starts bulging. We could have cracks or even some explosions. In the olden times, there used to be a lot of disasters from smoke tube boilers because at that time the water tube boilers were not yet designed. All of you must have you would have seen the movie Titanic. Titanic had four of these pretty huge smoke tube boilers. And if you can imagine, if one of these boilers has some kind of accident, the people in the engine room, they'll be very badly injured, if not completely dead. We go to the next point, point number 7. The tubes of this type of boiler generally have the larger diameter because you require the smoke to pass through these tubes. And since they are of larger diameter, they can be joined to the tube plates at the ends with the help of welding only. And as we said earlier, since the smoke tube boiler is like a drum, so water scarcity in this type of boiler is not much of a problem because all the tubes through which the smoke is passing, they always covered with water. And also the type of water which we use in a smoke tube water, it can be need not be as pure as what we have in a water tube boiler. A smoke tube boiler can take, let's say, chlorides up to a much higher degree than what water tube boiler can take. The reasons thereof we will come to later. Next, we come to water tube boilers. These boilers, obviously, they have a lightweight construction, and their efficiency, the entire efficiency of the boiler as compared to the smoke tube boilers is much higher. This would answer your question, Abraham. And as a result, this water tube boilers can be used to generate much higher pressure of steam and much higher quantity of steam. And the efficiency of combustion in this type of boiler is always good. Basically, point number 2 and 3 they are kind of overlapping. So for the amount of fuel that we burn, for the same amount of fuel that we burn in a water tube boiler, we generate a lot more steam. And due to the construction of a water tube boiler where the convection currents are very well set up, that means the water is circulating in all parts of the boiler and there are no areas where the water is stagnant. So the localized thermal stresses are much less due to the very good water circulation. And since it is not like a drum, the steam generation also takes place in a much shorter time. And a small water tube boiler will consume less space. So from a ship owner's point of view, water tube boiler makes much more sense. Firstly, it has got a lightweight construction, so it does not require that much of under deck strengthening. And since your weight of your equipment is less, that means the weight of the cargo which you can carry obviously will be more, and you can earn much more freight. And then they consume, since the footprint area of a water tube boiler is much less than that of a smoke tube boiler, the engine room size also does not need to be that much bigger, just because of the boiler size. So the engine room can be smaller, and obviously a cargo space can be more. Tubes have smaller diameter and interference method is used to fit them. We'll come to this. Now, tubes in a water tube boiler, since the smoke does not have to pass through the tubes only have to contain water. The tubes, they have smaller diameters. That means you can have a large number of tubes, so which will increase your surface area, which is required for heat transfer. Now, what is meant by interference method? Interference method, one very good example would be for those of you who have seen tail shaft being removed. We go to come to something which is completely different. The tail shaft of a vessel, if you've seen it being removed, the last flange, the flange bolts basically are fitted with the interference method, in the sense that the bolt size is larger, the bolt diameter is larger than the size of the hole in the flange. So the bolts basically have to be kept in the meat room or the fish room, and just before fitting them, they are brought down and fitted in place. And then due to once the bolts, they come to normal atmospheric temperature, they enlarge and they fit in the flange very tightly. So that is something which is the interference method, which means basically that the size of the tubes, the maximum diameter of the tubes is slightly larger than the diameter of the hole in the tube plate. So that means that basically the tubes have to be shrunk, and then they are pushed into the tube plate, and once they expand, so they form a very tight grip, and thereafter they can be welded also. In a point number 7, in a water tube boiler, the water level needs to be maintained. A water tube boiler is not so tolerant about low water level as compared to a smoke tube boiler. Smoke tube boiler, since it's basically like a drum, so the tubes which are carrying the hot flue gases, the tubes, they're always covered. In a water tube boiler, it is not so. The water tubes are around the furnace. So if your water level drops, that means there may be some tubes, the upper part of the tubes, which may not have any water, and then they are directly exposed to the hot flue gases from the furnace. And the quality of the water that is used in this boiler is always better than smoke tube boilers. Structurally, both are shell and tube type of boilers. Fire tubes have hot gases inside the tubes, while water tubes have water inside the tubes with hot gases surrounding them. So basically, in one case, the smoke tubes or the fire tubes have the hot gases inside the tubes, and in a water tube boiler, as the name says, the water is inside the tubes and the hot gases are outside. And the steam pressure limitation of a smoke tube boiler is about 16 bar. And this is again because a smoke tube boiler has got a lot of flat surfaces on which the force due to the pressure can be very high. Whereas in your water tube boiler, as we said earlier, a large number of tubes of smaller diameter are fitted. So the amount of force which is exerted on these tubes is not much. So the water tube boiler, the pressure limitation of a water tube boiler will be much more than a smoke tube boiler, and it will basically be within design limits. It can be unlimited. The output of boilers mainly depend on the design limitation. The unit output of a smoke tube boiler is around 20 megawatts. And that of a water tube boiler, again, if it is designed properly, it can be unlimited. And when it comes to efficiency, the normal thermal efficiency of a smoke tube boiler is about 80 to 85%. But this can be increased or decreased by using certain accessories. Efficiency of the water tube boiler is more than that of a smoke tube boiler, and within the range of 85 to 90%. This is the burner efficiency, what we were talking about earlier. The efficiency of a water tube boiler can also be used by increasing different accessories. We had talked about a hybrid. Basically, earlier we were talking about a hybrid between a smoke tube and a water tube. So that is also one of the accessories which we use. Let me go to that slide. This is what we had seen earlier. That time the connection was not very good, so I don't know how many of you were actually able to see this. But this is basically the construction of my Aalborg Sunrod boiler. Here you have the boiler furnace, the flame coming out from the burner. Around the furnace are these small diameter water tubes. All these water tubes, they're touching each other, so there is no flue gas which can pass out of the furnace. All these tubes, they basically form a wall around the furnace. The water in these water tubes is heated by this flame from the burner. The water and steam rises and goes to the steam and water drum. And here, this is where the hybrid part comes in. Here also you have the water and the steam drum has got these holes through which the smoke passes, the tubes through which the smoke passes. So here it becomes kind of a smoke tube boiler, and inside these tubes you have this so-called pin tubes or sunrod tubes, as they used to be called in the trade earlier. Sunrod tubes through which the flue gas from the furnace is passing, and again more heat transfer is taking place over here. The red part over here, that is the steam space, and then you have the steam stop valve from where the steam is going out to the services. So this is when we talk about accessories. Basically, this is the kind of accessories which we can use to increase our steam production. Let's go back to our original slide. The construction of a smoke tube boiler is comparatively much simpler. It's basically just a drum with some smoke tubes passing through it. It contains a large amount of water and steam, and it has got a good adaptability to changes in load and changes in water quality. So basically the amount as per the steam requirement, it can supply the steam when there are changes in the load. Whereas for water tube boilers, the heating surface layout is convenient for maintenance and cleaning. It is much more easier to maintain and clean. Since the surface area is larger, that is, we have a large number of small water tubes around the furnace, so they basically have a good heat transfer performance. So here again, we were talking about the efficiency. The efficiency of a water tube boiler is higher. The construction can also be used for conditions that need a large capacity. So since the efficiency is much higher and there are no limitations as far as pressure and temperature are concerned, your water tube boiler can be of a very large capacity as compared when it comes to kilograms of steam per hour. But the limitation of a water tube boiler is that it requires a higher level of water quality. Now, why does it require a higher level of water quality as compared to a smoke tube boiler. The water tube boiler plant is much less tolerant of high TDS levels. High TDS means total dissolved solids. And it becomes even less tolerant as the pressure requirement increases. The reasons for which is water tube boilers, they have a limited water surface area in the steam drum relative to the evaporation rate. So if they have a limited water surface area in the steam drum, that means if you have dissolved solids in the water, that solids are going to deposit themselves on the steel part of your steam drum. And as the deposits keep increasing, your thermal efficiency will keep reducing. And after some time, you will not have proper amount of heat transfer taking place. And because of this limited water surface area in the steam drum, your efficiency can drop down. If your water quality is not good, your efficiency of the boiler can drop down very quickly. Again, the turnover of water in a smoke tube boiler is much higher. Basically, the amount of water which is there in a water tube boiler is less, much less than as compared to a smoke tube boiler. And if your water quantity is much less, that means the amount of water which is evaporating into steam, going and doing whatever work it is required to do, and then coming back, the flow throughput inside the boiler is much higher. Since your throughput is much higher, if your total dissolved solids in the water is much higher, it is only the water which is evaporating. The dissolved solids, they remain back in the boiler itself, and the dissolved solids, they'll just keep accumulating in the boiler, and then the efficiency of the boiler will just keep dropping. Okay, let's go back to the original slide. Cost of a smoke tube boiler is much less than that of a water tube boiler of a similar capacity. The construction of a smoke tube boiler is much more simpler than that of a water tube boiler. As a result, the cost of construction is much less, even though the size for a similar yes, go ahead, please.
Sir, we cannot see nothing, only green, on some color only we can see. There is nothing on the slide.
No? Can you see anything? Say, any difference?
Now it is good.
No, okay, sir.
Okay, thanks. A smoke tube boiler, as we said earlier, the smoke tube boiler is much more tolerant to poor water quality, and also it is much more tolerant to, say, less skill of the people who are operating it. Whereas a water tube boiler is not not to put too fine a point on it. A water tube boiler is not that forgiving. A water tube boiler has to be maintained very well.
Yes.
Hello.
We can
Did somebody say something? Coming broken.
see. We can see.
You can't see? Hello. I will share the screen again. Tell me if you can see it now.
Yes, it is seen. It's possible now. Continue.
Okay. We talked about the cost of a smoke tube boiler, obviously, because the construction is not that complicated as that of a water tube boiler. So cost of a smoke tube boiler is much less than that of a water tube boiler. But the smoke tube boiler requires little less skill from the ship staff for its efficient operation. A water tube boiler, yeah, as we just said, that it is not that forgiving when it comes to the skill of the ship staff who are operating it. Firstly, the water quality has to be maintained very well, and also the cleaning of the smoke tube boiler, that is the furnace cleaning, etc., that should be carried out much more stringently. Smoke tube boilers, this is the same point which we are coming to earlier. We were talking about earlier. Smoke tube boilers have a much less problem with scale and soot deposit on the tubes. Since the surface area of the large amount of water is being carried in a smoke tube boiler, so amount of the problem with scale is not that much, and the same thing is about soot deposit on the tubes. The rate of steam generation in a water tube boiler obviously is much higher because it's got a larger number of smaller size tubes inside which there is water. The flow space requirement for water tube boilers is less. That means in the engine room, we talked about this earlier, in the engine room, the amount of space which you require if you are installing a water tube boiler, the amount of space requirement is much lesser. But the initial cost of a water tube boiler is more. So we have to balance the two, whether we want a more expensive water tube boiler, but as compared to a less efficient smoke tube boiler, but the smoke tube boiler will require more space, the steam generation will be less, and also the smoke tube boiler will be heavier. So the ship owner, he has to see what exactly his requirements are. As per his requirements, he has to make a choice whether he wants a water tube boiler or a smoke tube boiler. But most of the ships nowadays, they are usually fitted with water tube boilers because the advantage in price over a period of, over the life of the ship, say 20-25 years, the advantage in cost of a water tube boiler is much more than that of a smoke tube boiler. Next, we come to another type of boiler, which is the Cochrane single pass composite boiler. This is basically a smoke tube boiler. Here also, when the engine is not in operation, the steam generation can be continued by firing the burner. Around the furnace is your the single plate seamless plate furnace top, which is curved, and then you have a limited amount of smoke tubes through which the smoke from the burner is passing, and then it goes to the oil fired uptake. And on the side, as we saw in the previous example also, you have the exhaust gas, which is passing through a larger number of smoke tubes, and it goes through the exhaust gas uptake. This boiler also, Cochrane boiler, it has got a working pressure normally of about 7 bar, and the furnace is pressed out of a single plate, and it is required to be seamless. And the plating is good quality, low carbon boiler steel plate. Yes. Alemayu, go ahead, please.
This arrangement of the smoke tube, is it vertical or horizontal alignment?
No, the tubes are horizontal.
Which one is better? I think vertical, mostly we are seeing on the board ship is vertical alignment. The smoke will come from down parts and it will pass through and escape from the top, yeah? But if it's in horizontal direction, maybe it will be, the carbon will be deposed more, yeah?
No, on board the ship, you're talking about water tube boiler, or you're talking about smoke tube boiler. On board the ship, you'll mostly come across water tube boilers. Here, the Cochrane single pass, that is a smoke tube boiler. Hello.
So the smoke tube means the smoke is passed through the tubes and the water will be around the tubes, yeah?
That is correct. That is correct.
So on board ship, mostly where I am working is a smoke tube, but it's only vertical. I never see on horizontal arrangements.
On board the ship, you've come across smoke, you're working on smoke tube boilers. Hello.
Smoke tube boilers, but the arrangements of the tubes are vertical.
Vertical.
So the smoke from the main engine, the smoke will come from down parts and it will pass through and escape from the top parts. But this arrangement, the exhaust gas will come sideways. The smoke tubes are all horizontals, so it will pass to another. So I think
it'll pass through the tubes horizontally, and then it goes to the main engine exhaust uptake.
Okay.
So this is how this particular company, Cochrane, they have made their boiler.
Which one is good? The horizontal arrangement or the vertical arrangement?
I would say the horizontal arrangement that is my opinion only. The horizontal arrangement may be better because the exhaust gases or the flue gases from the furnace, they stay inside the tubes longer than if it was vertical. If it is vertical, it will just flow out straight away.
Okay, sir.
So the time required for heat transfer to take place, yeah, that is my opinion. The time required for heat transfer to take place will, in case of vertical tubes, will be less. So that means a lot of the gas which is passing through at the outlet also, the gas still contains a lot of heat.
All right.
And in this kind of boiler, you can also have a double pass or a single pass. So basically, double pass composite, that means 2 passes for the exhaust gas. The exhaust gas can pass through in 2 passes. That means in the first pass, a certain set of smoke tubes, then it passes through an equal number of tubes in the second pass. And then obviously it has got 2 uptakes. One is the uptake for the oil fired and one is the uptake for the main engine exhaust gas. Now, as with most smoke tube boilers, the designs which we have seen so far, the fuel is burnt in a furnace having a seamless hemispherical crown that is attached to the boiler shell by a seamless OG ring. And this OG ring, as we talked about earlier, is pressed out of a thicker plating than the furnace, and the greater thickness is necessary since the circulation at the bottom part of the water drum where this OG ring is fitted, that is around the furnace, the circulation in this vicinity is not good as elsewhere in the boiler. That means the convection currents which we have throughout the boiler, that at the bottom of the water drum, the convection currents are quite poor. And hence, since the convection currents are quite poor, the heat transfer is also much less. And the deposits which we have in the boiler water, the dissolved solids which we have in the boiler water, that dissolved solids also tend to deposit in the area of this OG ring. Now, the reason why we need to have a hemispherical crown is if we had a flat crown above the, let's go back to the diagram. If we had a flat crown, the weight of the water which is there in this column above it, the weight of the water would require that the flat crown should have some column or stage to keep it in place. Whereas if you make it a hemispherical crown, the weight is being transferred to the side shell. Weight is being transferred to the side shell of the boiler. Due to its design. So here you will not require any stays or columns. You put a stay or a column here and you fire the boiler. After some time, the stay or the column will get burnt off completely due to the boiler flame. So basically the inside of the furnace has to be completely clear. And then that's why you have a hemispherical crown, so that all the weight of the water column which is above it, that gets transferred to the side shell of the boiler through this OG ring. This is the OG ring which we have been talking about all this while. So this is your hemispherical crown of the furnace. This is your OG ring which has got thicker plating than the furnace, and this OG ring is again welded to the side of the side shell of the boiler. The side shell of the boiler here, it has got holes drilled all around the side of the shell, holes at least 3 millimeter in diameter in between these two welds, so that in case any of the welds fail, so that means you'll have some water coming out from here, or you'll have, if the bottom weld fails, then we have some furnace gases coming out. So you know which weld has failed. So you have these telltale holes all around the OG ring, all around the side of the boiler. And then because at this place the water circulation is quite poor, so your solid deposits tend to drop down and accumulate over here. So you will require some handholds over here from time to time when you are carrying out boiler maintenance. Some handholds are required so that you can open and take out all the sludge and other deposits, undesirable deposits which have deposited over here. It is very important that the sludge be taken out. Otherwise, if the deposits continue over a period of time, it will completely block off this area and harden. And after some time, your heat transfer will be very poor. Next, we come to boiler mountings. As the name suggests, boiler mountings are any equipment or fittings that are mounted on the boiler. On your normal boiler, you will have the main steam stop valve. If your boiler is also used for steam turbines, so you could have a superheater built into the boiler. So in which case you will have a steam stop valve for the superheater also. Then you will have something, steam stop valve for a de-superheater. This we'll come to that one later. What is a de-superheater? Then you have the feed check valves, that is for the feed water. You have the main feed check valve with the feed control valve in the line. The feed control valve will be controlling the amount of feed water which is being given to the boiler as per the steam consumption. So it will tend to maintain the required level. And then you have the auxiliary feed check valves. All these feed check valves, they need to be non-return and screw lift. Then you have vents. Basically on the steam drum, you'll have a vent. The purpose of all these vents, etc., we'll come to that later. Then you have a superheat vent also. Now the superheat vent, basically that's a recirculating vent. In your superheater, if there is no circulation, that means there's no requirement for the steam for your turbine. So basically the superheater vent can again vent back into your steam drum, into your normal saturated steam drum itself. You have the safety valve, 2 safety valves on the steam drum and 1 safety valve on the superheater outlet. The 2 safety valves on the steam drum, one will lift first, and then you have easing gear for the safety valves by which you can manually operate them to see whether they are not frozen in place, they are in good working order. Then you have gauge glasses. 2 gauge glasses are required as per the regulation. And also you can have the remote operation of the gauge glass, basically the remote display in the ECR of your boiler water level. On higher pressure boilers, you have the plate glass type of gauge glass. On low pressure boilers, you can have a round tube type of gauge glass. Basically, a round tube is a round glass tube inside which there is water and it is backlit. Whereas your plate glass, as the name suggests, and as you would have seen, it contains of thick plates of glass, and that is also backlit. And obviously, they can take much higher pressure than a round tube type of gauge glass. In a plate glass type, you have mica on the water side of the glasses. Mica is a insulating compound. While assembling the gauge glasses, you should not be putting any COPA slip, etc. And we are talking about the tightening procedure of the gauge glass, basically tighten from the middle outwards. And in case the gauge glass breaks, on the water inlet side, you also have a steel ball fitted, so that now the steel ball immediately, instead of the water rushing out, the steel ball will immediately go and close basically shut off the pipe where it is fitted. It's the diameter of the steel ball is obviously less than the diameter of is larger than the diameter of the pipe through which the water is going to the gauge glass. So if the plate glass shatters, the steel ball will go and block it off. Gauge glasses you can try out remotely, basically blow through the gauge glass remotely. In case the glass in a gauge glass it breaks, the gauge glass can also be shut off remotely. Yes, Melissa.
Yes, sir. In the previous slide,
Okay,
it says that no need to use copper slip on the joints. What is the reason behind this?
Basically, copper slip is a high temperature grease.
Yes.
So basically, when you are assembling the gauge glass, the gauge glass should be assembled dry. no external compounds.
Okay. Is there any side effect of the copper slip? Any chemical side effect on the glass, or
No,
what will be the problem if we use it?
problem. Yeah, if you use copper slip is basically for joints where you on high temperature joints where you want the joint to continue to move.
Yeah.
Even when subjected to high pressure. Here we are basically talking about plate glass which is fitted onto the onto the frame of the entire gauge glass assembly. So there's no need for copper slip over here, and also the copper slip over a period of time, the copper slip will tend to degrade, and the glass is basically mounted on the frame with using a jointing. You want that whole thing to be kept as dry as possible. Over a period of time, the copper slip can degrade and you could have leaks.
Okay, understand, sir. Thank you.
As per as per requirement, you need to be able to operate the gauge glass remotely. That means you should be able to blow through the gauge glass remotely, and also in case the glass breaks, you should be able to close the gauge glass remotely, because if the glass breaks, that means steam at very high temperature and also boiler water is escaping. You obviously will not be able to come anywhere near the gauge glass. So as a result, one should be able to shut off the gauge glass remotely. That means all of you must have seen your gauge glasses, the cocks of the gauge glass, they are fitted with these wires. And the end of the wire, there's a handle. By moving the handles, you can shut off the cock. When you're fitting a new gauge glass, basically the new gauge glass, since this, especially this plate type of gauge glasses, they are quite thick. They need to be warmed up. So to warm it up, store the spare glass close to the boiler so that the gauge glass gradually comes up to the same temperature as the boiler water. And once the gauge glass is mounted, it should be left in place for several hours before putting it on line. And once it is warmed up, it should be tightened up. This is I've learned this from experience that when I was a third engineer, I had, without properly warming up, I had started tightening the gauge glass, and after some time, after 1 or 2 hours, the gauge glass, basically the plate type of gauge glass, it shattered. So it is very important to warm up the gauge glass gradually and warm it up properly. The other boiler mountings which we have, you have the remote gauge glass, which is normally in the ECR. Then you have the Mowbray floats. Now you have Mowbray floats, and then you have the differential pressure transmitter. Okay, let's see the other one. This is your Mowbray float. A Mowbray float is basically a magnetic float. So this part of the float is inside the boiler. This is mounted on the boiler, or in the Mowbray floats. You can have it in many places in the engine room. It could be on your, say, settling tank. It could be on the service tank, and also on the boiler. So basically, it's a magnetic float, and it is basically a magnetic on-off. The wet side of the magnet on the float repels the opposing magnet within the dry side switch. That is, this part remains on the outside in a strong snap movement, activating the switch. Similarly, when the liquid level drops in a tank, the float pivots downwards, repelling the opposite magnet and activating the switch. So basically, a Mowbray kind of switch is a straightaway on-off switch. So if you have, so where would you be using a Mowbray float? Let's say a boiler high water level alarm, boiler low water level alarm. low level trip. You want the burner to trip off if the boiler water level has become low. So it is not something which is a level gauge. It is just straight on off. Similarly, like let's say on your heavy oil settling tank, you can have a Mowbray float to activate. If your heavy fuel oil transfer pump is kept on auto, you can have a Mowbray float where when the level reaches the required point, your heavy fuel oil transfer pump cuts in and it runs till the high level alarm is, or till the required level alarm, required Mowbray switch is activated, which is at a higher level. Once it reaches that level, the heavy fuel oil transfer pump that shuts off. And then you have the differential pressure switches. What do you require a differential pressure transmitter for? So this is your differential pressure transmitter. This side is the high pressure. This side is the low pressure. Why is this side the low pressure? Because this is from the steam. The inside the boiler drum, the pressure is the same. Whatever pressure is being activated, whatever pressure is being generated, the steam has got the same pressure, the water has got the same pressure. But due to the head of the water, at this point, it is not only the steam pressure, but the head of the water also that is acting on this particular pressure switch. So that means this side is the higher level, the high pressure, and this side would be just the steam pressure. So the differential pressure signal is normally transmitted, either it could be electrical or pneumatic, so that the output signal corresponds to the level in the boiler. That is, if you use the DP signal for remote water level gauge, high, low or low water level alarms and trips. So basically, you can use this for your alarms and trips, and also for remote sensing of the water level in the boiler in the ECR. Various valves and other fittings are required for proper working of the boiler. Those attached directly to the pressure parts of the boiler are referred to as boiler mountings. In general, all these mountings must be carefully designed to perform their function correctly. Obviously, they have to be positioned so as to be readily accessible for maintenance. The latter being performed either directly or indirectly by means of extended rods or spindles. Now, these are your basically, here we are looking at a horizontally mounted boiler. Here we have gauge glass. Basically, this is the list of boiler mountings. You have your gauge glass over here with your inlet, the steam side and the water side cocks. You have your the boiler foot, basically the foot of the boiler, and one side is rigid, one side is expandable. Then you have the saturated steam going to the superheater. The superheater superheats the steam and then it is sent to the turbines. Then you have this for the steam drum, you have the safety valves. Then you have the air vent. Then you have the steam drum water surface blow pipe, what we normally know as a scum blow down pipe. So basically all the scum which is floating at the top of the boiler water that is collected. There are some trays, shallow trays fitted on this pipe. The shallow trays, they collect all this oil and scum which is floating on the top of the boiler water, and then it is blown down when we want it. And then you have the feed valves. Then you have the feed check valve. And then you have something known as steam cyclones and separators. Now, steam cyclones and separators, normally we may or may not come across on our ships. But on ships which are totally steam ships, there it is very much required. A steam cyclone or a separator, just as a matter of interest, looks something like this. It's basically a small thing. Some of you may have seen this on board. So basically, over a period of time, the steam collects a lot of dirt. One thing, it collects a lot of dirt due to the internal corrosion of the steam pipes. So you may have very, very small rust particles floating around with the steam. Also, the steam may have condensed water. So if your steam has got condensed water, it's sent to this steam cyclone separator. Cyclone separator is nothing. It is quite similar to your cyclone lubile separator, which is fitted on the side of a generator. Basically, the force of the steam itself causes the steam to turn around, change direction very rapidly. And once it changes direction very rapidly, all the water content which is there in the steam and whatever solid particles are there in the steam, they drop down. They cannot change direction so suddenly. So they stick to the sides of the separator and they drop down. And the pure steam is then allowed to continue. And this is what a steam cyclone separator does. The working principle thereof: steam enters into the separator through the inlet tangentially, creating a high speed spiral airflow on the inner wall of the separator. Condensed water and solid particles are separated by the centrifugal force. Solid particles are then deposited at the bottom of the steam separator, and the separated condensed water is exhausted through the steam trap. And the entire steam separator is a closed construction. It's got no replaceable or serviceable elements inside. And the amount of steam which you want to pass through the steam separator is determined obviously by the diameter of the piping, inlet and outlet piping, and the pressure. Okay, let's go back to our original slide. Okay, you have the main steam stop valve. This is mounted on the superheater outlet header. This is basically, he's talking about a boiler which has got a superheater. Basically, that means the ship has got either your ship has got turbines, steam turbines. So basically, it is mounted on the superheater outlet header, and it enables the boiler to be isolated from the steam line. Again, if two or more boilers are supplying steam to the common line and you are carrying out maintenance on one boiler, or for some reason one boiler is shut down, the steam from the working boiler should not go to the boiler which is not working. So that means the main steam stop valve needs to be a screw down and a non-return valve type. And obviously this will prevent steam from the other boilers flowing into a damaged boiler. They are saying damaged boiler, but it could be just a boiler that is laid up or not being used. And in some cases, the main steam stop valve incorporates an automatic closing device designed to operate in emergency condition to shut off steam from the main turbines. Then you have the auxiliary steam stop valves. Auxiliary steam stop valves is basically a smaller version of the main steam stop valve, fitted for the purpose of isolating the boiler from auxiliary steam lines. Again, these must be screw-down non-return type valves to prevent steam flowing back into the boiler in the event of damage. These valves will be mounted on the superheater outlet header. A de-superheater can be used to reduce the steam temperature as required. We talked about this de-superheater earlier, and let's look at what it is. A de-superheater is basically nothing. Superheated steam can, obviously, it is at a very high temperature, and sometimes you do not want you're maybe producing superheated steam more than your actual requirement, and you want to de-superheat the steam and put it back in the steam drum of your boiler. So what do? You basically create a Venturi effect, and in that Venturi, where the Venturi effect is there, you spray some cooling water, and that cools the superheated steam down to de-superheated steam. The primary function of a de-superheater is to lower the temperature of the superheated steam or other vapors. And this temperature reduction is accomplished as a result of the process vapor being brought into direct contact with another liquid such as water. The injected water is then evaporated, Most desuperheaters incorporate the Venturi design, which uses the velocity of the steam to atomize the cooling water. So that is all there is to a desuperheater. We'll go back to our then you have these features. Then you have the feed check valves. They are fitted to give final control over the entry of feed water into the boiler. Again, the feed check valves need to be screwed down and not turned on, so that when there is less pressure, or let's say there is a pipeline rupture or something, the hot water from the boiler should not be flowing back into the feed line. So the feed check valves, they should be screw down and not return. So that boiler water cannot flow back into the feed line. And main and auxiliary feed check valves are fitted. The main feed check valve is often fitted to the economizer inlet header. If not, like the auxiliary check, it will be mounted directly on the steam drum. And the feed check valves also, they can have external spindles so that they can be operated from a convenient position. In case you have to, in an emergency, you have to shut them down. So they can be shut down remotely. And care should be taken to ensure the valve can be operated easily and quickly, and that a positive indication on open and close position of the valve is given. And this is a diagram of the feed check valve. Some of you may have come across this design. So basically, your feed water is entering here, entering into a kind of header. You have one feed check non-return type valve over here, and then you have the other one, which is a screw lift valve. So both the valves need to be open. This is your boiler shell plating, and then the feed water is entering the boiler. So in case there is a rupture over here, let's say the feed inlet pipe is ruptured due to some reason, or the pump has tripped off, the feed pump has tripped off, high pressure water and steam from the boiler cannot flow back into the feed line. So you have the non-return valve, which will obviously immediately shut down. Water level indicators. The rules state that at least 2 level indicators must be fitted to each boiler. In practice, the usual arrangement consists of 2 direct reading water level gauges mounted on the steam drum and a remote indicator placed at a convenient control position, which is usually the engine control room. Low water alarms. So the class society rules demand that these should be fitted to reduce the risk of damage in the event of loss of water in a boiler due to a burst tube or failure of the feed supply. Like I said, a water tube boiler, it is very, it is not very tolerant. It is very susceptible to damage if there is loss of water inside the boiler or if the water level is low. So that means a low water level alarm and then a trip is very much necessary. In some cases, the low water trip is mounted inside the steam drum, but in many cases they could be mounted externally. And there are various types. Either most of the types which are available nowadays, they are operated electrically. We saw the Mowbray alarms earlier, which are basically electrically and magnetically operated. Boiler blowdowns. Very important to blow down a boiler. So basically, blowdown valves, they are of 2 types. One is your scum blowdown and one is your bottom blowdown. All the scum, all the debris which is collected at the bottom of the boiler, that is blown down using the blowdown valves at the bottom. They are usually called the bottom blowdown. And then you have the scum blowdown, which is fitted at the top of a boiler, just at the interface level between the water and the steam. Your scum blowdown basically is very important in the case of vessels such as tankers, where you could be heating cargo and your cargo the heating coil inside your cargo tank is leaking. And then your cargo is coming back along with the condensed water. Your cargo is coming back, and part of this cargo finds its way due to some reason. Initially, first it has to come to the condensate tank, and one should be able to remove it completely inside your condensate tank or your hot well tank. If it is not removed properly, some of it may find its way inside the boiler, and then it can float on top of the water level inside the boiler, and also it can coat the inside walls of the boiler with oil. Once it coats the inside the walls, obviously your heat transfer from the wall is reduced because of this coating. Then you have the additional risk of explosion. If you have oil with the water inside a boiler, that obviously is not a very happy situation. Due to high temperatures, there is a risk of explosion inside the boiler. And here your scum blowdown becomes very, very essential. So as per the requirement of the boiler, certain times of the day, the boiler has to be blown down, bottom blowdown as well as scum blowdown through these blowdown valves. And these blowdown valves, they are fitted to the water drum to enable water to be blown from the boiler in order to reduce the density. When you are planning to shut down a boiler, these valves, they can also be used to drain the boiler. They usually consist of two valves mounted in series, so that the first valve can be fully opened before the second can be cracked open. That means sufficient time is given, sufficient to give the required rate of blowdown. In this way, the seating of the first valve is protected from damage, so reducing the risk of leakage when blowdown valves are closed. And these blowdown valves, they discharge into a blowdown line leading to the ship side discharge valve. A blowdown valve of the parallels spring-loaded slide valve type. Basically, they are talking about a gate valve type of blowdown, which is again spring-loaded and which is suitable for high pressure operation. Basically, the gate valve has got a double seating arrangement, so that reduces the risk of leakage. And as an additional precaution, the valves may be fitted in pairs. And a spanner fits over the square end of the pinion. This practice may be there on some ships, may not be there on other ships. A spanner fits over the square end of the pinion spindle only when the valve is in closed position. When the valve is open, the spanner cannot be removed from the spindle. Basically, this is to serve as a safeguard, so that if you have got more than one boiler, you cannot blow down more than one boiler at the same time. So if you have more than one boiler, obviously the blowdown line going to the ship side will be common. The blowdown line from the boilers will be joining at some point, and then the common line will be going down to the ship side. So if you have more than one boiler, you should not be able to blow down more than one boiler at a time. Hence this safety requirement of a spanner which can be fitted only one blowdown valve at a time. This is an example of a ship side blowdown valve. You may have come across this. A lot of ships nowadays, they are fitted with a normal screw down globe valve, two of them usually at the ship side. Or you could have this type also, which is basically a conical type of valve which is fitted inside the the conical type of spindle which is fitted inside the valve body, and you can turn the conical part of the spindle using a spanner. Scum valves, we just talked about that. These should be fitted when there's a possibility of oil contamination in the boiler. They are mounted on the steam drum and have an internal fitting in the form of a shallow pan or a tray situated just below the normal water level, which is to remove oil or scum from the surface of the water in the drum, these valves also discharge into the blow down line. So basically your bottom blow down line and your scum blow down line of the same boiler, they will join up and they will go to the blow down valve, which is at the ship side. Now your scum line, which is basically there at the interface of the water and the steam, just at the water level, at the top of the water level in the steam drum, they have these shallow pans, as they mentioned. And if you have any scum which is floating on, any scum, debris, etc., which is floating on top of the water surface, or if you have oil, which is quite dangerous, and the oil inside the boiler, it can turn into sludge. So the sludge would, obviously, sludge having a lesser specific gravity than the water, sludge would also be floating on top. Yeah, all that has to be got rid of. If the sludge starts forming a coating on the inside of the boiler, inside of the steam drum, on the metal surface, sludge being insulating material, the heat transfer obviously will get very adversely affected. And once the heat transfer gets adversely affected, then you can have local areas of overheating. And then, as we said, this oil and sludge being inflammable is not a very nice situation to have oil and sludge inside the steam drum of a boiler. Then you have air vents. Basically, when a boiler is being fired up from cold condition, the upper part of the steam drum has got air. All that air has to be vented out. Air has got oxygen. That oxygen has to be vented out of the boiler. Oxygen, if it dissolves in the boiler water, that is not advisable, because oxygen will, over a period of time, it will cause corrosion of the steel in the boiler. So for that, when you are firing up the boiler, the air vent has to be kept open so that all the air from the boiler, that is completely vented out. Again, when you are cooling down a boiler, the boiler should not be allowed to go into vacuum. A boiler can take certain amount of pressure, but normally it cannot take too much of vacuum. So you should allow the air to enter when the boiler is being allowed to cool down. For that, you need the air vent. Then you have the superheater circulating valves. Again, these are used on boilers where the steam is, when you are raising steam to power some turbine. So these are fitted so that raising steam, they can first release air from the superheater and then provide enough circulation to prevent overheating by allowing sufficient steam to blow off into atmosphere or to a suitable drain system. So that means in your superheater, if your, let's say your turbine is not working, if your turbine is not working, that means the steam which is being raised in your superheater, that is not being consumed. If the steam is not being consumed, that means it can lead to overheating. So that means you need to have enough circulation, and that's where these superheater circulating valves come into being. So that means they should only be closed when there is enough demand for superheated steam. That means you have a demand now for the steam to power a turbine. So then you don't need the superheater circulating valves. So they should be closed only when there is enough demand for superheated steam to provide the minimum circulation of steam required to prevent overheating. And then, of course, as all of you know, as third engineers, you must be doing chemical dosing of the boiler water for various things. And then obviously to carry out the dosing, you require all these dosing valves. And where you have dosing, you should have water sampling, because you need to know the condition of the water to know how much you need to dose. So basically the water sampling valves, they're fitted to the water drum to enable samples of boiler water to be drawn off so that tests required for the control of feed treatment can be carried out. So you basically need to know how much of treatment you need to carry out. And to know how much treatment you need to carry out, you need to test a sample of the water, for which obviously you need the sampling valves. Some ships, they are also fitted with a salinometer on the sampling valve itself. That means part of the boiler water is constantly passing over the salinometer. In case due to some reason, let's say some condenser is leaking, the condenser obviously in a condenser the steam is cooled to become condensate water using seawater. So in case some tube inside the condenser is leaking and seawater, there is seawater ingress into the condensate side of the feed water. That means your salinity of the feed water is going up. Basically, the chloride of the feed water is going up. So then you have a salinometer fitted online, and since the salinometer is fitted online, it will immediately give off an alarm to alert the ship's staff that something is not right. That means the salinity of the boiler water has gone up over the required level. At high pressures, it is necessary to provide some means of preventing flash off taking place as the pressure over the sample is reduced to atmospheric. This is usually done by passing the water from the boiler through a cooling coil, which reduces its temperature to a value below 100 degrees centigrade. Basically, your boiler water when your boiler pressure is say 10 or 12 degrees centigrade, 10 or 12 kg per centimeter square, the temperature of your boiler water can be anywhere up from 160 to 180 degrees centigrade. And this boiler water, if it is suddenly allowed to come into atmospheric pressure, it will immediately flash off into steam because it is coming at a temperature of maybe 160 or 180 degrees centigrade. So you require to pass this boiler water through a small cooler or a cooling coil, which will bring it down below the boiling point of water at atmospheric pressure, which is 100. Once it comes down below 100, then you can easily take the sample. Then you have soot blow master steam valves. These are usually mounted on the superheater outlet header to ensure the superheater is not starved of steam. On our kinds of boilers, normally your soot blower will be fitted on a exhaust boiler economizer. In some cases, you may also have soot blowing of your main or auxiliary boiler. So for that, you require the soot blower master steam valves, which are usually mounted on the superheater outlet header. Pressure gauge connections. They are fitted as required to the steam drum, superheater outlet, and to provide the necessary pressure readings. You need to know this is a mandatory requirement. You need to know the pressure of the steam drum. You would need to know the pressure at the superheater outlet header. And as most of you already know, the pressure gauges which are fitted to these pressure gauge connections, the pressure gauges, they have to be sent ashore for calibration as per the required periodicity. Definitely during the ship's dry dock or during a boiler survey, these pressure gauges, they have to be sent ashore to an class approved workshop for calibration. In addition, suitable connections must be provided for the pressure sensing points required for automatic combustion control. That means all your air pressure sensors, furnace pressure sensors, all the pressure sensing points, they should have proper connections. So from where your feed is going to your, let's say, for example, your air fuel ratio controllers, thermometer pockets in your normal boiler, you would not require a thermometer pocket, but definitely in your superheater header, you would require a thermometer pocket to know what is the temperature of the superheated steam which is going to your turbines. I will be back in 2 minutes. Right. So basically, we had touched upon this water level gauge glasses earlier. Now we'll go into water level gauge glass in some more detail. The regulation required that each boiler must have at least 2 independent means of indicating the boiler water level, and these indicators must be placed in a position where they can be easily and clearly seen by the operator. Scotch boilers must have two indicators placed on each side. So basically some of your smoke tube boilers, which are drum type, on each side, each flat side of the drum, because some of your smoke tube boilers, they are basically like a horizontal boiler, something like what we saw earlier in the diagram. This. Some of your smoke tube boilers, they are horizontal like this. So you'll need to have a gauge glass fitted on each side of the boiler. That way, since it is horizontal on one side, on one end you have a gauge glass, and then again you have a gauge glass on the other side. In most cases, marine boilers make use of marine boilers make use of two indicators in which the water level is clearly visible. Normally, these indicators you will find on most boilers, they are not exactly fitted on the same level. One will be slightly higher than the other. For low pressure boilers, you can use this tubular type water level gauge glass. We were talking about this earlier, tubular type and plate glass type. So for low pressure boilers, they are usually in the form of tubular type water level gauge glasses, while for pressures above, higher, some form of plate type gauge glass is used. The general arrangement is of a tubular type is as shown here. So basically you have the water side isolating valve. This has to be kept open. The steam side is from here. So that comes here, and you basically have a hollow column. Somebody's mic is on. So basically, this type of gauge glass is basically completely it's a hollow tube of glass, so in which you can see the water level. It comes to this hollow tube, and then from here it is sent to this is the actual gauge glass. Sometimes it can be mounted directly onto the boiler shell also. So you have a water cock and you have a steam cock, and this is a more elaborate system where you have the steam isolating valve. Then you have a hollow column, and this type of system obviously gives a greater amount of safety as compared to this, because if the glass here breaks, you only have this one valve to stop the steam or the water coming out into the engine room. Whereas here you have basically one, and you have two on each side, on the two valves on the steam side and two valves on the water side, to prevent the glass from steam from coming out in case the glass breaks. It basically consists of two gunmetal bodies, the glass tube fitted between them being held in place and sealed on each side by nuts tightened into soft tapered sealing rings. So basically, inside the frame, the glass tube is fitted, and then it is tightened. And each side of the glass tube is sealed, and the sealing surface has got this sealing rings which are basically soft. So that is why these kind of tubular type water level gauges are not used on high pressure boilers. Isolating cocks are fitted to the steam and the water connections, while the drain cock is fitted at the lower end, and it allows for blowing through the glass to test it. In some cases, gunmetal cocks have tapered plugs stemmed with asbestos are used. These are not only difficult to keep tight, but also liable to seize up. So basically here it says asbestos, but nowadays on board the ships, we do not use asbestos anymore. This is the old type of design which used to be followed. This type of gauge, you can also fit it directly to the boiler shell. While this is recommended in some cases with Scotch boilers, that is your smoke tube boilers, in order to clear the smoke box, it is fitted to an external pipe and alternative to a hollow solid column. That is what we saw here. Sometimes to keep it far away from the body of the body of the boiler or from the boiler shell, due to some reason, you can have this type of arrangement where there are pipes coming from the steam side and the water side coming to this hollow column, which could be further away from the kept further away from the boiler shell. And then on this pipe, you can have this cock for the steam side and a cock for the water side. And in between these two cocks, you have the gunmetal frame, or it could be made of brass also. And in this, you have in between them, you have the round type gauge glass which is fitted, and the gauge glass is tightened in place with these glands. And inside the glands, they are normally soft tapered plugs, which you tighten the gland with, and that prevents the steam or the water from leaking out. That makes an airtight, steam tight, watertight, airtight seal over there. And in case you have these types of this hollow type of gauge glass which is fitted indirectly onto the body of the boiler, away from the body of the boiler. I'm talking about the design on the right hand side. You can carry out some maintenance on the cocks also. In case you find that the say cock A is leaking, you can carry out some maintenance on the cock. Whereas if cock A is leaking, let's say on the design which is given on the left hand side of your screen, there's no way you can carry out any maintenance. That means if, for example, the gland of the cock has started leaking, or the cock itself has started malfunctioning, that means the cock is not holding anymore. To carry out any maintenance on cock A or cock B on the left hand side of the left hand side design, you'll have to shut down the boiler and bring the pressure down to 0. Whereas as per the design on your right hand side, on the right hand side of your screen, if your cock A or cock B is leaking, or even if the glass is leaking, you can shut off your steam isolating valve D and your water isolating valve E. And once you shut these off, your maintenance on cock A or cock B, that is the steam cock A or water cock B, can be carried out very easily. If you need to tighten your glass, that can also be carried out. So that is the advantage of having this the design which is there on the right hand side. wherein the gauge glass is kept a little further away from the body of the boiler using a piping and this hollow column. In this type of design, also in this type of design, you usually have a small metal ball fitted inside. As long as the gauge glass is fine, the metal ball basically does not block any of the passages. But the moment the glass shatters, the ball will come and sit on the outlet of this frame over here and block off any steam or water which is trying to come out. It depends on where your glass is broken. If your glass is, basically it will be on the balls on both sides. Before you can come and shut off the cocks, it may take some time for the ship staff to come and react and to shut off this cock A and cock B. In the meantime, these glass balls, they have basically like a ball bearing, like a ball, the ball, metal ball as you find in ball bearings, they are floating around inside this under normal circumstances. But once the glass is broken, the metal ball here will go and block this passage, and the metal ball here will come and block this passage. So that will give some time to the ship staff to come and shut off steam cocks A and B. A ball valve is fitted on the lower end of the gauge glass in order to shut off the water in the event of glass fracturing. Otherwise, as water is blown out, the reduction in pressure causes it to flash off into large volumes of scalding steam with possible injury to engine room personnel. Although steam will escape at the other end, it will not be subject to this great increase in volume, and thus the mass of steam blowing out is limited. However, in some cases, restricting orifices are fitted in the steam end, only allowing a greatly reduced quantity of steam to blow out in the event of failure, just sufficient to indicate a fracture. So that means the the glass balls, which are the metal balls which we were talking about earlier, they need not shut off the orifices completely. If they are giving off, if some steam is allowed to escape, that means the ship staff, because of the noise and because they can see it, they will be able to determine that the glass in the gauge glass has broken, and then they will be able to come and shut off the steam and the steam side and the water side cocks. That means reduced quantity of steam is allowed to escape in the event of failure, just sufficient to indicate that there is a problem. Plugs are fitted in the gunmetal bodies to allow for removal of the glass tube and for cleaning various passages. Plate glass guards should be fitted to prevent injury in the event of glass tube shattering. So basically around the glass tube, okay, I've noted the message. Around around this glass tube, there should be a guard that is fitted, because in case it shatters, somebody is there in the vicinity, he should not get injured by this flying glass pieces, sharp pieces. And with this tube type of gauge glasses, sometimes it becomes difficult to understand whether it's completely empty or completely full. So, some people, they follow the practice of painting diagonal black and white stripes behind the glass. When you are seeing the diagonal black and white stripes behind the glass, basically due to the refraction of the light through the glass, you'll be able to figure out where exactly the water level is. If it is full of water, refraction will cause the stripes to appear bent in the opposite direction. If no board is fitted, a pencil or similar object can be used to the same effect. Finally, the handles of the steam and water cocks must lie vertically downwards so that obviously due to vibration, the handle should not close. And obviously the gauge glass has got a drain cock. The handle of the drain cock should be pointing downwards when it is closed, whereas the handles of the steam side and the water side cocks should be hanging downwards when they are open. This is to prevent vibration, etc., causing the cocks to move in such a position that the false indication of the water level should not result. And gentlemen, that is all for today. We'll take up the rest in the next class. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Welcome.
Thank you.